Today we'll be visiting one of my favorite Gulf Coast paddling spots. Lake Charlotte has provided many dynamic paddles throughout the years, and I'm excited to begin with what will no doubt be one among many trips documented from Cedar Hill Park, which is located at 1112 Lake Charlotte Road, Wallisville, Texas, 77597, and situated on the western shore of Lake Charlotte. The lake and its surrounding waterways hold some fascinating history that we'll touch on in a bit. But for now, we'll talk about the park's present-day amenities. There are restrooms, picnic areas, a fishing pier, campsites, and a hiking trail on site. The launch is a primitive carve-out nestled between the towering shoreline cypresses. It's from here that we'll launch onto Charlotte. For today's route, we'll be skirting the western portion of the lake toward its northeastern corner, known as Willow Cove. This portion of the paddle will offer some great views of Charlotte's expanse. As you skirt the cove, you'll come to a small passage with a small island to port and a waterlogged tree line to starboard. Just a note, this section can be a bit tricky to navigate when water levels are low, as it's become shallower in recent years. When that's the case, you'll be better off heading around the island instead. Once through this passage, we'll see the entrance to Mac Bayou. Once on the bayou's narrow corridor, you'll likely see a few sets of eyes emerging from the swamp in short order, as a number of alligators reside in Charlotte's surrounding tributaries. Even on a day such as today, with a high heat index, there were dozens upon dozens of gators momentarily surfacing throughout. This region is known as the alligator capital of Texas, after all. Most often, this section is accented with the accompanying soundtrack of native waterfowl. In addition to varieties of herons and egrets, Charlotte and its surrounding waters are known to be a great spot for frequent sightings of ospreys and, more occasionally, bald eagles. There are quite a few obstructions such as downed trees, briars, and even overhanging limbs, yet I've never found this section impassable with a bit of flexibility. Approximately a mile and a half in, you'll come to the end of Mac Bayou, which intersects with what is known by locals as Little Mac Lake. Bearing left here would take you onto the Trinity itself. However, we'll be electing to head right. Almost immediately, we'll come to the unassuming entrance to Mac Lake proper, where we'll hang a left. While Charlotte's expanse feels very much like a conventional lake, Mac Lake has more of a bayou or cypress swamp aesthetic. Instead of vast open tracts, Mac Lake is fairly narrow throughout, with winding corridors along the way. Today, its waters were vibrantly rust-colored. It might have been from recent sediment runoff. However, it almost had the appearance of a heavy iron content. Plenty of curious gators kept a lookout from a distance along the way. About halfway into this section, we'll come to a cross that always brings about a somber pause. Though I don't know whom it memorializes or what occurrence led to its presence, it's a reminder of the diligence required, especially when paddling solo, to maintain safety. Mac Lake will have a few jogs before concluding. At this point, we'll have traveled just over 3 miles. Here at the lake's northern terminus, you'll see another subtle inlet leading into some very narrow corridors that meander onward. Today, a mass of branches only allowed approximately a half-mile of further northward travel. I encountered several substantial gar on this stretch, one of which surfaced next to me and gave me an unsolicited shower. At this point, we'll turn back, retracing the arbor-laden cypress bottom swamp, and continue south through Mac Lake until we reach the initial intersection with Little Mac Lake. Here we'll sweep left. This will lead us onto an interesting stretch with remnants of the bayou's past still residing along the starboard side. Here, tremendous bulkheads still creak decades beyond their dereliction, bearing some of the ropes, chains, and accoutrements of their former heyday. There is also a substantially elevated pier that was no doubt the hub for loading or unloading the commercial goods that were once transported to or from the Trinity and beyond. Records are sparse, but it's suggested that lumber, oil field supplies, or perhaps even sulfur were among the primary commodities that once filled the old, rickety barges moored here. This stretch will conclude at a cypress-laden cul-de-sac of sorts. It's here, under the ever-watchful eyes of egrets and alligators, that we'll begin our return journey. As I made my way back toward the bayou tributary that linked Charlotte and Mac, a bass boat did momentarily appear. But this was the only time out of countless treks here that I'd seen one. Still, be aware that there's a slight possibility that you'll be sharing these waters with powered craft on the stretches that branch directly from the Trinity. From here, we bear left back onto Mac Bayou. Just a note, there can be some pretty significant confluences in this area, influenced by wind, tide, and the occasional operation of a levee farther down the Trinity. The trek back down the bayou was pleasant, as the late afternoon current moved swiftly enough to carry me back with ease. There have, however, been a couple of occasions where the current was so swift that my paddle became more of a steering and braking tool than an implement of propulsion. Once back at Charlotte's Passage, we'll head around the outside of the small island on the opposite side from where we traversed earlier. On this outing, Charlotte had grown choppier and storm clouds were beginning to gather. But I made it back to the Cedar Hill launch just as the first sprinkles began to fall. Here concluded another great trek of just under 7 miles. My final thoughts on this route are as follows. Lake Charlotte, in general, is a favorite spot due to the versatility it offers, given its cypress-lined expanses, branching bayous, arbor-laden passages, plentiful wildlife, and numerous route variations. I will say that Charlotte can be temperamental, so know the forecasted conditions and plan accordingly. Other than that, I've got nothing negative to say about this spot. In my opinion, it offers one of the best backcountry experiences that recreational paddlers can undertake in the area. The other draw, as mentioned earlier, is its rich ties to Texas history. I'll plan on doing a more substantial deep dive into this topic at some point, but the cliff notes are as follows. Several archaeological findings attest to the fact that Charlotte's bordering banks were home to Native Americans long before Texas was Texas. In the early 1830s, the current location of Cedar Hill Park served as the site of Nicholas de Combe Labede's plantation. He would serve as a surgeon among Sam Houston's forces during the Texas Revolution. It is after his mother that Lake Charlotte bears its name. The area continued to serve as a highly regarded recreational destination throughout the era of the Republic of Texas and beyond. As already mentioned in reference to the remnants of the backwater port, commerce was also a focus of the area, given the local tributaries connecting to the Trinity River. All of these factors and more make this a highly recommended paddle that can be enjoyed by kayakers of all skill levels when conditions are favorable. Give it a shot and share your thoughts below. Thanks so much for being part of the GCK community. Paddle safe, and God bless.